Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Rambo. I am a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Bucknell University, which is located in Pennsylvania. Although I am currently located in Florida, I'm our Southeast Regional Representative, which means I live and work with students in the Southeast. And I'm joined today by one of my favorite colleagues from another institution to give you two different perspectives. So I'll let Jorge introduce himself.
Right, thank you, Lauren. So my name is Jorge Haise, and I am an associate director of admissions at Tulane University. I work with students from Florida and Puerto Rico, but I live in New Orleans, right? So I have to travel all the way to Florida to see, students in that state. But it's a little bit of a different dynamic. With that said, the biggest thing that we're going to talk about today is more how both of our institutions and also how other institutions, right, see the activities section and what you should be looking for. But with that, I'm going to pass it on to Lauren.
Great. So I think the most important question that we get asked, or the most common question, is what are you looking for? What are colleges looking for in this search process, in getting to understand your high school experience? Why are we considering anything that we ask on the application? And there are a lot of different nuances and a lot of different pieces, but at the end of the day, what colleges are looking for really is you. We're looking to get to know you, get to know your experiences, and to figure out who you might be on our different campuses. You don't stop being who you are just when you start applying to colleges. So we want to get to know who that person is now and who that person might grow into while they're on our campuses. There's three ways to break down the college application. We're only going to talk about one of them tonight, but to just give you some context, I like to think of it as the academics, the personal, and then of course the extracurricular. We need all three of these together to understand the full picture of your high school experience, of your life experience so far, as we consider students to bring to campuses. Academically, we need to know that a student will be successful. It's not just getting you to our campuses, it's graduating you from our campuses. So what does your academic record look like? That might come up in the transcript and maybe test scores, potential major, other areas of your academic work will be reviewed in different ways by different colleges. And then also the personal factor, your story, your experiences, who you are, what matters to you. Extenuating circumstances, what recommenders have to say about you, who are you going to be as a community member? And there's lots of different places where we get all of that information. But of course, tonight, we'll be talking about extracurricular. So Jorge, do you want to talk about the different pieces of that?
Yeah, sure. So, like extracurricular activities are essentially one of your opportunities in the application to really tell us a little bit more about who you are, right? So far, we learn about your GPA, we learn about your transcripts. We also get to see your essay and things like that, which is yet another opportunity to stand out. But your activities really show us what you're interested in, right? They show us, a lot of things about you, where you might shine, where you might do well based on the things that you do. And it's not like a deciding factor in the sense that, oh my God, the student doesn't have this activity, that's it, right? It's more painting a picture of who you are, right? So anything like any clubs or organizations you're part of, whether that is you're at your school or outside of your school, like sports, any jobs that you have, family responsibilities, which, this is tricky because, we don't mean chores, right? We don't mean you making your bed every morning. That's not involvement, right? We mean more, say, for example, that you have to take your siblings to like school or something like that, or you help tutor your siblings for, their assignments at school and whatnot. Some students even help take care of some elderly members of their family, right? So those things are family responsibilities that are going to be definitely, they're going to look good in the application. It's going to show us exactly what you're spending your time on. Any internships that you did, some students have access to these, right? Some students are able to do these early on. Not everyone has them. And then obviously any summer programs like summer camp, say anything you did with another university or whatnot, that's something you can definitely include in the activities. And then any hobbies or special interests, right? Things that you really dedicate a lot of time to. So this is a very long list, right? You might think, oh my God, I'm missing, for example, like a summer program, or I don't have any sports that I can include in my activities. It doesn't really matter, right? Because not every student is going to be able to do everything. What we're looking more is to see consistency, right? That you're dedicating time to each of these activities. but then also that you're, committing to something, because that shows us, right? It gives us an idea of how well you will do in college, right? Because college requires that level of commitment.
Absolutely. And that's a big reason why they matter to us, why we're looking at them, why we're looking for them. We're also looking for community members, not just scholars. We need scholars. That's a key factor of what happens on a college campus is learning. But there are so many different ways that you learn, so many different places where you can learn things. So we want to imagine the hollow group of scholars and scientists and artists and athletes and community service focused people and special interest focused advocates, allies, all of that works together on a college campus. And just like Jorge said, not everyone can be everything. Some students are going to be really, really great at a particular program. Some students are going to be our dabblers, and they're going to try a little bit of everything. Some will be leaders officially. Some will be unofficial leaders as well. Typically, you only have one president, maybe co-presidents of a club, but there's lots of other ways to show up. So we're trying to get a sense of who you might be as a whole community member. And the experiences that you have had already inform how you're going to continue learning, growing, what you're interested in, the perspective that you might bring into a classroom or into a residence hall or into a lab setting, et cetera. All of that is important too, as we think about building communities across our campuses. So what counts? We've hinted at some of this. It's really whatever is important to you. And I think this is especially important for our current rising seniors. Students are going to be high school seniors in the fall, where you've had 2 school years, typically big school years impacted by a pandemic, where maybe you haven't gotten to be as involved as you imagined or hoped that you could be. And now you're just starting to get ready to fill out those college applications. Know that there are still ways to show us what's important to you. I think across the country, Jorge, maybe you're having this conversation in your office too, of some informal ways that students show interest, I think are going to be extra important this year because we know that you haven't gotten those formal opportunities. So know that we're not looking for students who are going to check every single box, that they're not going to have every single type of activity that's listed here. It's your combination that's interesting to us.
Yeah, and definitely remember that obviously we went through a very difficult year last year, and like Lauren said, you guys went through not only 1 year, but 2 years that have been impacted by this pandemic. So we don't expect your level of involvement to be at the same level as students before you, right? We don't expect you to have to think about involvement right during the pandemic, because as a student, I wouldn't have done that, right? There were too many things happening. So you don't have to feel like you don't have enough activities or things like that. Don't be worried that you have to email us and let us know, right? A lot of students are emailing us and saying, oh, I just want you to know that last year I didn't dedicate as much time to this or that. We are going to get that from the context of your application, right? We understand that last year was not a common year. And so you might have become a little bit more creative with how you get involved, right? And you might think, oh, I came up with this roller skater club or something in my community because we didn't have anything else to do. So we wanted to be outside, right, and do something. Some students did that last year, right? So you might have stuff like that are things that you came up with during the pandemic. And those are things we want to see in your involvement, right? So don't feel like those don't count because anything that you did in that time is something that's going to give us some context about what your involvement actually looked like.
Or a question I've gotten from students in the past is, does it have to have happened at school to count as an extracurricular? What would you say to students?
I mean, I wouldn't just think that just because you're not doing an extracurricular at school or a club at school that it doesn't count. I can give you a good example. A few years ago, about 4 years ago to be exact, I had a student from Amarillo, Texas, who put down as one of his activities that he actually bred snakes for a living as a high school student. He had like this whole business and he had like all these different snakes, and that was like a thing that he did. And you might think, oh my goodness, like that activity is so out there. Well, not really, right? That is just telling me that that student is very into what they're doing, and it's just showing me what they're spending their time in, right? And this activity is not something he was doing through school, but it took a lot of his time. Jobs, for example, right? That's not something you do with school, and you might not even think that that is something you have to include in your application. I would definitely include it, right? Because that's showing me one that you have a higher level of maturity in a way because you decided to start a job, which is a higher level of responsibility, right, on top of school, and that you're able to balance those two things. So it doesn't have to be something that you're doing at school, right? It doesn't have to be always a sport or an academic club or something like that. It could be other things. And then on that note, when you think about sports, right, you might be a basketball player in your high school, but then you might also be a coach for a basketball team in your neighborhood, right? Include that, right? Because that's going to show us a little bit more about what you do with your time.
Absolutely. It's getting a sense of what your day looks like, what things look like. So we've given some different examples of stories we've heard from students and some more out there experiences that we've had as well of things that we've seen on applications. But this next part, we're going to give you a chance to see what it looks like when you're filling out this portion of applications. The most important thing that you can do as you're filling out the activities section, the extracurricular section of your college applications is to take your time and to make sure that you're telling us the most important details of that organization. So we have 3 examples that we're going to share. This is where I'm going to ask you to be a little bit interactive and use the chat feature to put some thoughts in. You can send your thoughts just to the panelists or to everyone if you're feeling brave, or just write some notes to yourself to have a discussion with a friend or a counselor or somebody, or just to reflect on yourself. I think these 3 examples are helpful in letting you see what we see. Okay, so with all of that suspense, now I'll tell you this picture is blurry. It is not your screen. It is not your eyes. It is not your computer. This picture is blurry. So I apologize for that. I'll read through some of it to help with the blurriness here. But as you're looking at it, I want to know what you students, attendees, what you learn about this particular student. I see under activities, journalism, publication, the bold lines of the activities are categories that, in this particular instance, the common application will give you. There's the common application and the coalition application are 2 of the more popular applications that you'll likely be filling out for at least a couple of the schools you're applying to. Where you fill out all of your personal information, a lot of details, your essay, your activities, and it'll get sent to multiple schools. Those schools might have member-specific questions, so you'll get to that school section and fill out its information. But the common application and coalition application allow you to get rid of a lot of duplicating efforts, to fill out information once and be done with it. And then other institutions will have institution-specific applications. So this just gives you a sense of what one might look like. So the journalism, the student government, music, community service, science, math, these are categories that Common App has as options for you. There's also many, many others, and there's always a catch-all, other section that you can fill out as well. So this student has told us which years in high school they participated in these organizations. Looks like this student did all of their clubs and activities through the school. We see how many hours per week and weeks per year, and that they plan to continue these activities in college. Now, we don't hold you to that forever, but it gives us a sense of what's something you might be ready to let go of and what you're looking forward to exploring. They put what their titles have been within that club and each school year, and then give us a very brief description of what each of these organizations are and the role that they played in that organization. So this student did a particularly good job of giving us snippets of what they're involved in and the key point that they want us to take away from each of those organizations.
Yeah, and something to know too about the way that the student organized everything, they didn't use acronyms, right? Everything is listed by what it's called, so I don't have to figure out what the acronyms mean. Something that I always tell students is like, you do not want your admission counselor to do your homework for you, right? So you definitely always want to make sure that you make it as easy for us to read this activity section, because some universities are looking at 40, 50,000, 80,000 applications per year, right? So they can only dedicate a certain amount of time to reading the application. And every school has a different process, but you don't know what the process is for each school. So you do yourself a really good service by making sure that when you put down this activity section, that you are as clear as possible, but precise, like the student is being here, right? We're getting what the activities are about. We understand what the student is interested in. But then it's also very easy for us to process. Some that I also notice about this activity section is that the activity that they dedicate the most time to, or the activity that is the most important to them, seems to be on the top, right? Like that way we know immediately that the student is into journalism, that they're part of student government, that they do music. That tells me a lot of things about the student. For one, I would see this and I would think this is going to be a great community member. This is going to be a student that's going to come in and is going to join a lot of organizations on campus. But if you take anything from this, right, think about how it is structured. There's no acronyms. There's useful data for us to get to understand a little bit more about the student. So the student is taking every opportunity they have to make sure that they stand out in this process.
Yeah. And Jorge, we got a question that I typed a quick answer to in the Q&A, but does it matter if you held something throughout both middle school and high school? And my answer was, we're primarily interested in what you've continued to do throughout high school, but it'd be cool for you to tell us, this is something I've done for a really long time. I see that a lot with dancers. Dancers typically started at a very young age and continued on, or maybe you were introduced to like a coding club or something like that in middle school that you've had a leadership role and you've continued doing it. We're primarily interested in what you've continued though. So if you did something in middle school, even if it was a leadership position and you didn't continue doing it in high school, we're not so concerned with that. You get 10 lines, 10 spaces that you can fill out with activities, which is a lot, but I would make sure that you're focusing on things that you continue doing. So this student's question in particular, it sounds like it's something that they've done in both middle school and high school, and probably are thinking beyond. So that would be cool for us to learn about. But I would focus on what the high school experience has been. I don't know if you'd say anything different, Jorge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just like I would echo all that you said, but then also, that's a good thing you can include when you describe the activity. You can say, I have been involved in this since high school, right? And that's going to give us a little bit more context about what that activity is like. But yeah, we don't really put much weight onto anything you did in high school because we're evaluating, middle school, because we're evaluating you for what you did in high school.
Our hope is that we've all grown a little bit from 8th grade to 12th grade, although that is a tricky transition. Okay, so here's another example. This is a different type of student. So I'd be interested to hear what our attendees think of this student. We see a couple of new headings pop up here that we didn't see in the previous one. And there's a slight difference between the two. So I'll give everyone a second to read through this. And please, if you have questions, you don't have to hold them till the end. Jorge and I have gotten very good at multitasking on Zoom over the past 2 years, so please keep them coming. Okay, so we've given everyone a chance to read through. Jorge, first impressions about this particular student.
Yeah, so something that you might notice immediately from looking at these activities is that some of the things the student is doing is similar to what another student did, right? Like the other student was also in journalism, through a publication at their school. They were also in student government. And I'm mentioning that just to, say that you will probably do things that are similar to other students, right? And that's okay, right? You are all in high school. We don't expect you to intern for the president of the United States, right? That would be great if you did that at that age. But, that is not something that we're not looking for something to be super out there. these activities are completely fine, and they're telling us, right, a little bit more about who you are. But something that I noticed here, right, that again gives us a little bit more context, right? You will see that the student dedicated 4 years to that journalism activity, 3 years to social justice, 4 years to student government. Interestingly enough, they put the LGBT organization a little higher up, even though they didn't dedicate as much time to that. In that situation, like I would think, oh, maybe this is something the student realized that they wanted to be involved in later in high school. Maybe this is not something that when they were in ninth grade or 10th grade that they were ready to join. But it is in connection to everything else that the student is doing. I think something that they could have done, they could have put that work activity a little higher up, and in terms of organizing the activities, right? Because it's really cool that they actually held a job for 4 years, right? This is something that they did. We don't expect you to, be completely in love with your job as cashier at a restaurant in your neighborhood, right? It's a job. But seeing something at the bottom like that, that might be something that we miss. With that said, this student is like, still, I would say, very, very involved, definitely more involved than I was when I was in high school. This is also, I think, a good example of what a good activity section looked like. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Lauren.
Yeah, I would say a key difference between the first student and this student, whereas we talked about the first student being kind of well-rounded. They did a little bit of everything. They were involved in, I'll go back, they were involved in newspaper and student council and music and service and research. This student seems a little more focused to me. I wouldn't be surprised if this student had a particular path laid out for themselves, a very clear interest in social justice, in advocacy. I would imagine, particularly in LGBTQ issues, given there's a couple of different references to that on there. This student has a passion, is what I'm picking up from their activity section, where the first student is open to exploring. This student has a passion, and we need both. We need both types of students. I think there are maybe some myths out there that you have to have done a little bit of everything in all pockets of high school in order to seem impressive to a college. To me, both of these students are impressive. And one having a particular direction and taking advantage of school activities, but also some summer forums and some advocacy work within politics as well, while having a part-time job. The other student jumped into, a biology club later on in high school. They stuck with a lot of things for multiple years. So I think what's important to remember as you start thinking about your high school experiences, what you've enjoyed doing, what's an interest of yours, things you've been researching on your own, activities you've been able to join or start to dabble in, is that both can give us a picture of how you might engage on a college campus. I'm already starting to see, that first student's going to be at the activities fair, signing up for a bunch of different things, whereas this student's probably going to get involved in a little more focused way, at least to start. And maybe I'm completely wrong about them too, right? Maybe these students come to campus and totally surprise me. We hope for that as well. But I've got a sense of who they might be as community members.
Yeah. And the important thing is to remember, right, that these two activity sections are just as valid, right? Like there's not one is better than the other, right? It's just two very different students that have very different interests. And that's fine because we want, like Lauren said, we want our community to be like that as well. We want to bring people that have different perspectives.
Yeah. All right. We have one last example, because as often as we want to give good examples, we also want to show you some things that we see that we hope you don't do.
Yeah, this one's fun. So there's a few things here. For one, when we say brief, we don't mean 3 words, right? We definitely want to learn a little bit more about what each activity is. It seems like a lot of these activities to me are not involvement as much as they're just things that the student does, right? That don't really require like a lot of like planning or effort or, any, process behind that. For example, like going to church. Well, I mean, you're getting in the car with your parents and you're going to church, right? Like that's not telling us much about what you do when you're in church. Are you involved, right? In any service organizations within church? Are you in the church choir? Do you help out, during like, the mass or sermon or whatever, right? Like what do you do when you are in church? Because, if you're just going to church and sitting down, that's not really an activity. That's not really something that, I mean, it just tells me that you go to church, but other than that, right, there's no effort from the student to have to do that. Video games, I think that that's a great activity to have when you compete at video games, or when you have like a specific hobby or club or something in your high school. But unlocking new levels at a video game, I do that on my couch on my iPhone. Every time I download a new game for my phone, right? So like it's not something that's like an activity, it's a hobby. I think that's it's important to see the difference between like what is an activity, what is something you do for fun. We definitely want to know what you do for fun. That's great. It gives us a little bit more information about you. But for the activities section, things should be a little bit more intentional. This we see a lot, and I don't know if Lauren sees that a lot in her application pool, but I see this one a lot. Travel with family. Yo, that's not an activity. Going to Europe, that's a vacation. And like we're reading that and we're thinking, oh wow, like really, like the student really thought that this is something that would add to their application. I mean, great. I mean, I would love to be on a cruise in the Caribbean, but I'm here in my room, right? So it's definitely important to think about what that means. And this also reminds me of a very interesting activity that students will put in their activity section, that I feel that it can be really good or it can be a little cringy depending on how the student words everything. And it's service trips or mission trips or things like that. Those are great, right? I love that students definitely, like are involved in service, but be aware of how you put those down, because it's not listed here, but it just reminded me because of the travel with family thing. Sometimes students will say, oh, I was in, say, for example, an X country for a whole week doing service, right? And then when they write down the hours and things that are dedicated to service, they'll say 168 hours, right, of service. That's as many hours as there are in a week. So unless you didn't eat, used the bathroom, showered, slept, right, unless you didn't do any of those things, you definitely didn't dedicate 168 hours. So it's not that you shouldn't include this, it's that you should be aware of what you actually did there, and be honest about the times, the actual time that you dedicated to that service. But this travel with family thing, we get that a lot, and it's not a family responsibility. It's a family perk, but not a family responsibility.
And I think that's where the key message here is. Each of the categories that the student chose are incredibly valid. Religious involvement, spiritual involvement can be really important to who you are as a person, and we want to know about that. Computer technology clubs, gaming clubs, absolutely there's value in that. Coding, we're not trying to tell students what's worthwhile doing and what's not. All of these sections exist because they're important to students. But what this student didn't do particularly well is to tell us more about how they're engaging in those particular categories. The family responsibility one would make me very upset if I saw that in a real application, because there are students who have significant responsibility at home, like Jorge said at the beginning, taking care of siblings, of parents, of elderly relatives, of neighbors, elderly neighbors, right? Especially during all the heat waves. There are ways that students have been taking care of their families and their communities that show tremendous responsibility and maturity. And this takes advantage of that category. So each of these categories exist, and there's absolutely ways that we think that they are engaging, that students have shown that they're important to us. But this particular student took a rather lazy approach to filling out the activity section. Occasionally we see students who try to pad the activity section a little bit with some things that they've done that maybe dabbled in here and there. And I think that's okay. It's okay to tell us some of the things you dabbled in. This particular student didn't even try to do that. So I think that's where this one goes particularly awry, is that it's not even an attempt to show us engagement. It's a, here are my pastimes, here's what I do passively, as opposed to showing us how you're actively engaged in your school, your community, your families. And that's where that big difference is. We got a question that came in: if somebody plays in a church choir, would you list that under music or under a different section, give it its own section? I say it's up to you.
Yeah, you could put it under religious, you could put it under music, whatever, whichever category is completely valid. That will not really like seem off either way, because if it's music, then you're doing choir, it just happens to be at church. If that's your religious, involvement, then it's just religious, right? It's not going to have that big it's not gonna be like this student that's gonna be hard for us to figure out exactly what you did.
Yeah.
There's another question. It's a very long one. So regarding extracurricular interests, how would the formality of something impact the way a college would care about it? For example, if you have a band playing at venues, or a self-made club pushing the students' interest, or even engaging in the community. In other words, how formal would it have to be considered seriously? That's a really good question. I think it has to do with how you describe the activity and how easy it is for us to see the level of commitment that you have to that. Because say, for example, if you created your own music group, right, and you are playing at different things in your community, whether that is like at church or that is at different, like school events, because they might let you play because you have your own band or whatnot, right? That doesn't take away from the activity, right? Because, if you're in high school band, you put a lot of work into that, but then you're also not doing the planning, right? So when you have your own group, you have to do the plan. You have to work a little bit more into what you're actually going to do with that club. So it's about explaining what you guys do, right? There's a big difference between saying, oh, I have a local band and we play at all these different things, or we engage in all these different things, to saying, oh, I just play the piano for fun every Friday, right? So like there's a big difference between that. So formality is not as important as you making sure that you are able to describe what you do, so we can see the level of effort that it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. My inclination is, since you're asking us about this, you should make sure it's somewhere in your activity section. If it's important enough that you want to know, you want to make sure, to me, that says you absolutely should put it down. And in case it's a club that you made at school because you're interested in music, I think that's just as important too, right? Because you're exploring different things, you're having conversations, again, setting meetings to have these different things, different than sitting at lunch with your friends and sharing a new song that you found. So those are where those lines are. Where there's a little more planning involved, a little more extending outside of just your immediate circle, would be a good way to get to decide if you're going to put it on there or not. But I would say, if it's something that is important to you and how you go through your day and go through your world, it doesn't hurt to put it there. As long as you're taking the time to tell us why you're putting it there. And that's where the example of what not to do, what that student didn't do. They didn't take the time to tell us why it was important that we knew that they play video games. They just told us that they play it occasionally. So that's where that difference is. A question about, do physical activities such as sports count in activities? And if so, how does that affect acceptance? Sports absolutely count. Sporting teams, travel teams, sporting events, coaching, all of that counts as activities. How it affects acceptance is going to vary based on all of the other pieces of your application, based on the schools that you're applying to. If you're particularly good at your sport, maybe you're being recruited for that particular sport, that's a whole separate process at some places. So yeah, absolutely that counts. Sports can show us teamwork, commitment, perseverance, endurance, all of those different things. As you go through those different experiences. So yeah, absolutely. And again, both school and out of school, travel teams, those kinds of things, tell us about a student too. We know the commitment it takes for practice hours, especially when you're in season or if you're a multiple sport athlete, all of that too.
And we have gone, like, I think the second question that we got after that was about if we put more value to activities done in high school to activities outside of high school. No, not really, right? Every activity has the same value, right? There is no set formula of activities that's gonna make your application shine more than the other, right? Because every student is different. So, like, for example, a sport that you dedicate 40 hours to every week, it's just as valid as a job that you dedicate 40 hours plus a week, right? Because those two things are taking time out of your day, right? You have to make an effort to do those things. So regardless of what the activity is, it's gonna have the same, I think, the same impact. The big difference, right, is making sure that it is an activity, and as we discussed earlier, that it's not a pastime or something that you do, when something that you do for fun or whatnot, right? That's a little bit different. But you can also include those, right? Just make sure you give us the context. I guess what I'm trying to say again is that there's no specific activity formula or specific activities that look better than others, right? We just want to get to know you.
Yeah. And then we have another question that the student has heard people say that some instruments are seen as more valuable than others in being part of ensembles. And I have to say I've heard that too. I've heard colleagues use it as an example, and I think it gets misconstrued a little bit. So I'm really glad that the student asked this question. The example that I've heard given is, you never know what a college is looking for in their first year class. Maybe this year we need more French horn players we have a ton of violinists. That's an example that I have heard colleagues use to say each school has different priorities in building their first year class and building their community to ensure that they have a well-rounded college campus. It is not meant to say that any one particular instrument is more valuable than any others, or that any particular activity is more valuable than any other. That might come into play if you're going to be a music major, or if you're applying to a conservatory or something like that. But in most cases, when I've heard the example used, it's us pulling random activities out of the air to try to give a sense of what a class might need that year. So again, I will go back to what is important in the activities and extracurricular section is that you have dedicated time to it. A good question that you can ask different colleges that you're applying to could be the way that they read applications. If you're looking to be a music major, is your application reviewed by music faculty before it gets through the whole process? At my school, for example, it's not. And I think any student who plays an instrument is impressive because I couldn't make it through a whole year of piano lessons. So to me, it's cool that students have stuck with instruments for a long time, that they're in bands, that they have all these interests. I couldn't tell the difference, between students who are exceptionally good and students who can carry a tune. I mean, I probably could, but it's not for me to judge that. It's for me to judge how students are involved. So I want to know what you're committed to, what you're interested in, and that's what matters most often to admissions counselors in the process. But it's a good question to ask, especially if you're applying to really specific programs or really specific schools, if some of those nuances exist in their process. But I would guess most of the time it's more the commitment and engagement that you've shown in your instrument, whatever it ends up being.
Yeah. And I also think that, it's funny because we got it in the chat too about like how some instruments might be harder to play than others. I think that's very subjective, right? Because, like, I think the French horn is a very unique instrument that, for example, like if you're listening to like the Fifth Mahler Symphony, you hear the French horn like 8 times throughout the whole, however long the symphony is, like an hour, right? So they don't play it all. You don't need as many French horn players, right? So like thinking that the French horn is necessarily like something that will, will make you look a little, help you sound a little bit more, right? Not necessarily, right? But also what is easier to play? Like, I think that's very subjective. That's, I mean, for me, for example, I'm a singer. So for me, singing is easier than playing the violin, right? But for a violin player, singing might be much harder because they're more of a violin player. So it's a little subjective. And when it comes to schools like, Tulane, we're not a conservatory. So we think it's great that you play any instrument, whatever instrument that is. If it's a xylophone, great. If it's the harp, amazing, right? Because I don't know how to play any of those. So, it's not going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah, really good question, and just came in. If you have an unusual but important activity that only lasted 1 year, should it be included versus a less important, consistent activity? I say both. I say you don't have to choose one over the other. And for us, the Common App, and I think Coalition does this too, recommends that you put activities in order of most importance to you, the student. So if it was a super important experience to you and only lasted a year, tell us about that. I think that's going to be especially true for students for the next couple of cycles with having multiple school years in a pandemic. Maybe you only did get to have that activity for 1 year, or it's potentially only ever supposed to be a 1 year commitment to something. Maybe your school does it on a rotating basis, or it's a community organization or project or internship that happened for a short period of time. So I would say put in what is most important to you. And then you can always use the additional information section to tell us why it looks like it's only a 1 year commitment, but this is why it's more important to you. Or if you run out of space, you have an opportunity in that additional information to include other things that maybe didn't fit in the activities list. Or you can email your admissions counselor. So there's always ways to give us other information if you need to. But I think there are lots of great examples of short-lived activities that are highly, highly important to students. And we want to know about those too.
Yeah, and like, for example, like, last year, I think actually, yeah, last year we saw a lot, at least I saw a lot of students who were like involved in like political campaigns for like big names, right? And like, it was just like, maybe 3 months or something like that. But that is really cool. So you definitely want to include something like that. So don't feel like you have to pick and choose. And if nothing else, you can always shoot us an email. We can always make a note on your file, right? Like there's a lot of ways that you can let us know why that activity is there. I think there's another question. Is there a follow-up to the application, like a callback or interview? This is a little bit more application specific. I think that depends on the school too. Tulane doesn't do that, right? Like we read your application and we make a decision based on that. We do offer interviews before you apply or during the application process, but we do not interview a student after reading their application, right? So it's going to depend on the school that you're applying to.
Yeah, most schools that offer interviews give you the chance to schedule an interview, regardless of if they've read your application yet or not. So you'll want to follow up with each of the schools that you're applying to find out what their process is. Most often that kind of, you submit an application and then have an interview or a callback or an audition or something. Most of those things are around merit scholarships. Or things like music majors, that kind of thing, where it's you submit an application and then we reach out to you for acceptance to an institution. Typically, all of those things can happen at the same time, so you're not waiting to hear back from us first. Oh, and thank you. I referred to an additional information box. Where is that? So it's one of the sections on the common application that you'll get to, and the coalition application. And I would imagine most institutional specific ones have something where it's, is there anything else you need to tell us? So it'll be, as you continue through the application, it'll come up. Yeah, good question. Do internships taken outside of school count as well? Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. And you have space where you're able to tell us who the internship was through, kind of a brief synopsis of what you maybe did with that internship. So yeah, there's definitely space for you to tell us about that. Absolutely. I would say most students that I see who have internships did get it outside of school. Although we do see more and more schools adding an internship component. So we see both as really great additions. Okay, I'm gonna give people a couple more seconds to type in those questions if they have them, either in the chat or in the Q&A box. I have a couple of takeaways up here. We're looking at quality, we're looking at what's important to you, and know that it's finding your interests and not trying to check boxes for us. That's what makes you a more interesting applicant. That's what's going to make you happier in completing high school as well, is doing things that are of interest to you. Because we really do want to get to know who you are as a person.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about the consistency aspect in the application process and whatnot. But the way you become consistent at something is when you're doing something that you like, right? So like you don't have to have every single activity. Just find activities that you really enjoy, because if you really enjoy them, you're gonna stick with them.
All right, and on that piece of great advice, we're gonna call it a night. Here is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us, whether you're interested in our schools or not. We are here to be a resource for you. We know in this process, there are often more questions than answers. So please don't ever hesitate if there's something we didn't get to today that you're hoping we would cover. Know that you're more than welcome to reach out to us. I'll give you another minute to copy all that down. And there's upcoming sessions for SACAC minicamp college sessions. So please don't hesitate to check those out and join us for another session in the future. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.